But we went after Osama bin Laden because after the war against the Soviets in 1992, when that finally ended, his name began to turn up all over the world, in Mindanao, in Yemen, in Chechnya, in Uzbekistan, in East Africa. Not that he was in command of all of those places, but he had provided money, training, false documents, rhetoric, sermons that were on tape and were used. And so we set up the unit to decide whether or not he was indeed a threat or just another Saudi spendthrift. And it turned out, obviously, that he was a very hands-on military commander.
August 7, 1990 marks the exact date the U.S. military arrived in Saudi Arabia to take part in defending the country from Iraq, whom invaded Kuwait. But on this day, a willing martyr awaits his final act. However, he faces a pressing conundrum. The distinction between suicide and martyrdom is no trivial issue in the thinking of an al-Qaeda jihadi. Bin Laden's al-Qaeda group went to great lengths to ensure that there had to be a religious authority and guidance to anyone in the organization, in which they also had to swear bayat, loyalty to the emir, Osama bin Laden, before even God. This was to maintain moral authority over his subjects, who had to follow through with his murderous invocations, which in his mind were permissible even though the Quran forbade it. Committing a sin in furtherance of a righteous cause is theologically untenable. Bin Laden, shrewd as he was, twisted the sin to an act of martyrdom for the sake of Islam, as well as labeling the victims as sacrifices for the greater good if they were Muslim. If they were not, they were advocates for the Crusaders and Jew. The initial premise for al-Qaeda was to follow the structure of the Maktab al-Khidamat, a creation from bin Laden's mentor, Abdullah Yusef Azzam, but not with jihad inside Afghanistan. He wanted jihad outside of it, under the subtle influence of the Egyptian jihad members such as Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, Sayyid Imam al-Sharif, also known as Dr. Fadl, and Mamdouh Mahmoud Salim. Al-Qaeda stretched internationally into the Caucasus and Philippines, connecting with the Islamists fighting against the communists in Chechnya and Afghanistan, and the secular Arab publics in Egypt and the polytheists in Indonesia. Bin Laden constructed al-Qaeda with a militant mindset, something Azzam was very wary about at the Services Bureau. According to Jamal al-Fadl's testimony in the United States versus Osama bin Laden trial, a high-level meeting took place in a guest house in Khost, Afghanistan. There, Abu Ayyub al-Iraqi, Yassin Abu Ayyub al-Iraqi, would hand over some documents for Jamal al-Fadl to sign. It was a document which stated that the designated signer would declare unwavering loyalty to a group led by a single emir, which would continue the jihad outside of Afghanistan. Another meeting would take place at Jihad Well al-Faruq training camp, renamed to Al-Faruq, which would have many signatories to this group. They consisted of Afghan mujahid and Egyptian Islamic Jihad members, such as Abu Ayyub al-Iraqi, Abu Ubaidah al-Banshiri, Abu Faraj al-Yemeni, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, Sayyid Imam al-Sharif, Abu Burhan al-Iraqi, Abu Hafs al-Masri, Abu Musab al-Saudi, Abdullah Izzeldin, Abu Fada al-Maki, and Mamdouh Mahmoud Salim. Jamal al-Fadl explained for New York prosecutors that during the meeting, Abu Ubaidah al-Banshari would hand out the documents which stated the group's agendas, rules, and duties. It also had designated committees. It also had a Shura Council. This Shura Council made sure that those who signed on to al-Qaeda were doing morally correct invocations, not immoral ones, as the Quran forbids martyrdom. Those on the Shura Council: Abu Hafs al-Kabir, Ayman al-Zawahiri, Abu Ibrahim al-Iraqi, Fadl al-Masri, Abu Faraj al-Yemeni, Abu Fadl al-Maki, Syed al-Masri, Quadriceps al-Jaziri, Abu Ayyub al-Iraqi, Khalifa al-Musat Omani, Saif al-Libi, Abu Burhan al-Iraqi, and Abu Muhammad al-Masri. The message from the recent Wahhabi adherents, however, have changed. No longer is there the wish to make the world Islamic, but to enforce a political form of Islam, which is a reaction to the current U.S. foreign policy of the last 80 years, which has a connection to Israel, both enemies to the Salaf. However, the majority of the Sunni school of thought has been noticeably critical of the Salafis and have openly condemned the terrorism enforced by these self-appointed caliphs of organizations such as al-Qaeda. However, these condemnations have not been given any attention by the legacy media involved with the West, but instead have been seen as the affiliates of the terrorists in which they have condemned, leading us to the current war on terrorism, which has no defined enemy, while generalizing Muslims as a whole unit endorsing terrorism. According to Gilles Kepel, French political scientist and Arabist, quote, Salafism is an ideology that posits that Islam has strayed from its origins. The word Salaf is Arabic for ancient one and refers to the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, arguing that the faith has become decadent over the centuries. Salafists call for the restoration of authentic Islam as expressed by the adherents to its original teachings and texts, end quote. However, many Islamic Sunni jurists, however, found Ibn Taymiyyah's definition of jihad too conservative. Members of the Egyptian al-Jihad and al-Qaeda follow the followings of Ibn Taymiyyah. In an interview with CNN on October 27, 2014, Abdullah bin Baya, a Mauritanian politician and professor of Islamic studies at the King Abdullah University in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, said this in regards to the definition of jihad. Quote, the truth is that the concept of jihad in Islam is not always synonymous with fighting. Jihad is a wider concept. It is a sort of defending the truth and calling it through the tongue. Almighty Allah said in the chapter of Al-Furqan, persevere in impelling them with this Quran, with a mighty impelling. That is, establish the compelling arguments and present to them the proofs, one after the other. Obviously, reciting the Quran does not involve military actions. Hence, not every jihad is fighting, and not every jihad is fighting for jihad. Jihad is also a call for freedom, end quote. In 1992, Bin Laden, along with the Egyptian Takfiris, Ayman al-Zawahiri and Sayyid Imam al-Sharif, found solace in the Sudan under the guidance of Hassan al-Turabi, leader of the National Islamic Front, the African version of the Muslim Brotherhood. Some al-Qaeda members who traveled with bin Laden, along with members of Egyptian Islamic Jihad, began operating guerrilla training camps in Khartoum under the tutelage of Abu Ubaidah al-Banshari and Abu Hafs al-Masri. It was here that under the Egyptian religious indoctrination of the members of al-Qaeda, as well as the organizational structure of the former Services Bureau, that al-Qaeda swayed its members to swear unwavering loyalty to bin Laden and to jihad against the Americans and